Hello, Year 8. Happy New Year. Welcome to 2021. Let's hope it's a better one. Hope you've had a very restful Christmas, a very peaceful Christmas, and I also hope that you're ready to do some learning. In case you don't know, I'm Mrs. Sunderland. I've made some videos for you this week to help you get back into your learning and get ready to come back to school for when we see you next. So, quick reminder of how best to learn whilst you are at home. Make sure that you're in a quiet place, wherever that may be. We all have different places that we have. You may be in your bedroom, you may be in the dining room, you may be in the lounge. Just try and make sure it's quiet. Either turn the TV off, put some earplugs in, put your earphones in with your own quiet music to block anything out. Just try and make sure it's an environment where you can concentrate on your work. Have everything that you need before you start. So whatever it is that you're watching this video on, it might be a phone, it might be a computer. You'll need your English exercise book and a flat surface. So it might be like one of those TV trays that you eat your dinner off like I do. Or it might be a desk. It might be another pile of books. Make sure you've got your pencil case like you do when you're normally at school, sat at a table. Make sure you've checked Teams. You should be able to access that. We've shown you in school. Okay, so make sure you've checked Teams because there should be an instruction from your teacher. If you're not sure how to check Teams and how to get Teams, you can get it on your phone. There will be an email sitting in there from your teacher with a little video that I've made, and you'll have seen it in school as well, with how to use Teams. So make sure you get to grips with that. If you can use TikTok, you can use Teams. It's easy. Finally, the most important one, work hard and do the best that you can. We know it's not ideal, but we need to make sure we are continuing our learning. No sitting at home watching daytime TV thinking it doesn't matter. It does. What do you do if you need help? Because obviously you're at home and you can't just put your hand up. Pause the video and work at your own pace. Okay, we all work differently. Pause it. Go back if you need to. If you didn't understand everything I said the first time, just go back. And don't worry if you don't understand everything. This is one video for Year 8. So that's why it's important that you check Teams, because your teacher may have given you some slightly different instructions. What can you do if you need a friend to help you with? Obviously we can't go around each other's houses. There's all sorts of technology. Can you use WhatsApp? Can you use Zoom? Can you work with a friend over technology? Why not? And make sure you check the King James's website on remote learning, or the English website, the Google website that you should have used last lockdown. There are lots of videos on there to help you get to grips with technology. If you really get stuck, get in touch with your English teacher and they'll help you. Okay? Right. Are we ready to do some learning? Let's go. Okay, so first task, writing the title in your book. Recapping term 1, narrative structure. Now, you read some books called, or some stories, bits from stories on the Graveyard Book, The Telltale Heart, Frankenstein, and you looked a little bit on narrative structure, how stories are structured. Can you remember anything? What does it mean by the structure of a story? So write the title neatly, underline it, and a little brainstorm. You can do it in a bullet point list if you want, it doesn't matter. Can you remember anything? Just pause the video here and do a little plan. What can you remember about narrative structure? Okay, so what did you get? Don't worry if you didn't get the same as me. Add anything that comes up to your list or brainstorm that's on mine. So, the beginning happens at the start of the story. The writer always made a decision how they were going to open it. The middle, and of course, therefore, the end. Beginning, middle and end. Nice, clear, simple structure. Setting. Where does the writer decide to set it? Locations. Types of locations do they have? So really, structure is about where a writer places something in a text and why they have decided to do that. Okay, alright, so if you didn't get any of those down, and you may have some other ones, and that's absolutely fine. If you didn't get any of those down, just pause the video here and add those to your list. Okay, continuing our little recap then. There's a little line drawing on the page, and I'd like you to try and recreate that in your book. Don't worry if it's not exactly the same. You need 2 straight bits and a pointy bit in the middle. And then there are 5 numbers. And in your lessons before Christmas, you should have looked at something about a pyramid of a story. Can you remember where those different sections of the story structure go on that pyramid? And if you can at this point, you might be able to remember what they're called. But don't worry if you can't remember, because I'm going to bring those up in a minute. Alright, so just pause the video at this point and try to remember where those different sections go. Okay, so did you put them in the same place that I did? Alright, so those are the different sections of the story narrative. And did you get any of their names? Can you remember what they're called? Don't worry if you didn't, but the names are coming up in 3, 2, 1. There we go. So, can you remember then where they go? So we have climax, we have a resolution, we have introduction, we have rising action, and we have falling action. So your next task is to pause the video and to see if you can match them up with the numbers. So just pause the video here and see if you can match those up. Okay, the answers are coming up in 3, 2, 1. There we go. So, can you remember what they are then? Introduction. It's pretty obvious really, where a character is introduced, where a setting is introduced, and rising action is where it's kind of a problem happens, where some, issue arises, things start going wrong, and the climax is where the big dramatic thing happens, where it's the ultimate problem. Falling action is where things start to resolve themselves a little bit, and resolution is where it all turns out, where it's all resolved, everything's smoothed out okay. Doesn't always happen that way though, doesn't always resolve itself. That's a very simple explanation of a story narrative, and writers sometimes play around with that and sometimes they tweak it a little bit. So if you haven't got that written in your book with all the numbers and the labels, make sure you pause the video and jot that down in your book. Okay, and the last recap we're going to have a look at is narrative hooks. So you can see on the board, or on the screen, we have some images that match up with narrative hooks. And a narrative hook is a way that a writer hooks you at the start of the book. So your first task is try and, in your own way if you want, reproduce those little images. There are 6 of them. No, there aren't. There are 7 of them. I can't count. Okay, so you could just do a little question mark. You could just do a little jigsaw piece, a little speech bubble, a laughing face, a heart, an eye, and a pointy finger. Doesn't matter if they don't look as good as mine. I didn't draw them. Then, once you've done those, I want you to pause the video and I want you to try and think, can I remember the names of the hooks that go with them? And don't worry if you can't get every one. So just pause the video, jot those down. Can I remember the names of the hooks? Okay, so the answers are coming up in 3, 2, 1. Aha! Tricked you there, didn't I? So those are the answers, but they're not in the right place. So your next task here is, if you couldn't remember them, there they are, but where do they go? So we've got a visual hook. A visual hook will describe characters and settings. An atmospheric hook will make the reader feel emotions. A puzzling hook will make you ask questions. A subtle hook will make the reader piece things together. A direct address hook is where the writer speaks directly to the reader. Comedic hook, this should amuse the reader, make them laugh or chortle a little. Direct speech hook, speech is used to create a fast start. Okay, so if you hadn't already, there's a little bit of help for you. Can you match them up now to the pictures? Pause the video and do that now. Okay, so I promise you the answers are coming up in 3, 2, 1. There we go. All right, so don't worry if you didn't get them all right. There are a couple that you may have got mixed up, such as a puzzling hook and the subtle hook. But those are the answers there from what you did in term 1. Well done. If you got any of those right, they're not easy. So make sure you pause the video and got those down. Okay, so moving on to something new, Year 8. We're going to be reading a new book this term. We're still going to read it, even though you've not got the books at home. I'm going to be reading it on the screen. So your new title is Chapter 1 Narrative Hooks. We're going to be reading Holes by Sachar. Some of you may have read it already, which is fine, because we're going to be looking at narrative structure in there. Okay, it's got a very, very complex structure in the book. So I've put again on the board, on the screen, the narrative hooks, and the first chapter is very short. I'm going to read it. I'm going to have it on the screen. I'm going to read it to you as well. And we're going to read it. We're going to try and decide what narrative hooks have been used in the first chapter. And a reminder that narrative hooks are used to engage the reader. So a reminder of the 7 hooks there, and I will put them back up on the screen after we've read the chapter as well. Okay, so make sure you pause the video to get the title down, which is Chapter 1, Narrative Hooks. And then on the next slide is going to be the first chapter. And we're going to read it, and we're going to look for the narrative hooks. There is a challenge, which is going to be to spot the evidence to back up your decision. So once you've thought, oh, there's definitely that hook, I want you to make sure you can find the evidence in the chapter that proves that that's there. So for example, if you think, oh, well, I think there's a direct speech there, you should be able to find evidence of direct speech in there. Or if you think there's a visual hook there, where is the description of the character or the setting? Or if you think there's a comedic hook, where is the evidence of something that's making you laugh? Okay, so chapter 1 of Holes is coming up next. Here we go, chapter 1. There is no lake at Camp Green Lake. There once was a very large lake here, the largest lake in Texas. That was over 100 years ago. Now it is just a dry, flat wasteland. There used to be a town of Green Lake as well. The town shriveled and dried up along with the lake and the people who lived there. During the summer, the daytime temperature hovers around 95 degrees in the shade, if you can find any shade. There's not much shade in a big dry lake. The only trees are 2 old oaks on the eastern edge of the lake. A hammock is stretched between the 2 trees and a log cabin stands behind that. The campers are forbidden to lie in the hammock. It belongs to the warden. The warden owns the shade. Out on the lake, rattlesnakes and scorpions find shade under rocks and in the holes dug by the campers. Here's a good rule to remember about rattlesnakes and scorpions. If you don't bother them, they won't bother you, usually. Being bitten by a scorpion or even a rattlesnake is not the worst thing that can happen to you. You won't die, usually. Sometimes a camper will try to be bitten by a scorpion or even a small rattlesnake. Then he will get to spend a day or two recovering in his tent instead of having to dig a hole out on the lake. But you don't want to be bitten by a yellow spotted lizard. That's the worst thing that can happen to you. You will die a slow and painful death. Always. If you get bitten by a yellow spotted lizard, you might as well go into the shade of the oak trees and lie in the hammock. There is nothing anyone can do to you anymore. Right, so you've got at the top of the screen the 7 narrative hooks, and I've also included the chapter at the bottom as well. So I want you to think, which of the narrative hooks can you think have been used? So I'll just let you pause the video a moment and have a think, and then I'll let you decide which ones you think have been used. So pause the video a moment and decide which ones have been used, and discount the ones you think those have definitely not been used. Okay, the answers are coming up in 3, 2, 1. Well, first of all, has a puzzling hook been used? Have I got any questions? I think I have. I'm not going to say what questions I've got yet, but I'm going to keep the puzzling hook in there. The subtle hook. The reader has to piece things together. No, I'm going to discount that one. I don't think it's that much of a puzzle, really. I'm not really that puzzled. I've given quite a lot of information there. Direct speech. Speech is used to create a fast start. Well, it's very easy to spot speech because you will look for speech marks. Are there any speech marks here? No, there aren't. Well, you may say there are, but it's not used for speech because we have, on the first page here, we have lake, but it's not used because someone is speaking to us. Have a think about why those speech marks are used. The only trees are 2 old oak trees on the eastern edge of the lake. It's like those when you use your fingers when you're speaking to someone. Lake. They're being sarcastic, aren't they? So it's not used because someone is actually speaking. Okay, it's because there isn't really a lake. So comedic hook. Is it funny? Am I laughing? Am I having a little chortle inside? No, not really. Atmosphere. Am I feeling emotions? Am I terrified? Am I feeling all emotional and distraught when I read this? How am I reacting? No, not really. Okay. Visual hook. Characters and settings. It's not really describing characters. It mentions the warden, but does it describe the setting? Well, yes, it does, doesn't it? It certainly describes Camp Green Lake, so we're going to keep that one. And then direct address hook. The writer speaks directly to the reader. Now that's a tricky one. So, can we see anywhere where the writer speaks directly to the reader? If we look at the last sentence, there is nothing anyone can do to you anymore. If you get bitten by a yellow spotted lizard, you won't die. Well, I think I'm going to keep that in there. I think we'll have that. So we've got those 3, a puzzling hook, a visual hook, and a direct address hook. Okay, so if you got those 3 year 8, very well done, because that's not easy. Don't worry if you had some of the other ones, because it was a fairly difficult task. Okay, so the next thing you need to do is you need to have those 3 hooks written down in your book. Like so. So we're going to look for where we can find the evidence for the puzzling hook, the visual hook, and the direct address hook. Here's a copy of the chapter again. Now, obviously you've not got a copy of the chapter at home, but I want us to see if we can find some quotations where we are made to ask a question, where we are given some description of a character or a setting, or where we can see that the writer is speaking directly to us. So I want you to pause the video here, and I want you to try and write down at least 1, but up to 3 maximum, because that'll mean 9 in total, and that's a lot, of quotations that match up with these 3 hooks. So just pause the video and see if you can do that task. Your quotations need to be short and precise to match up with where you are made to ask a question, where you are given a description, and where the writer is speaking directly to us. Right, so what did you get year 8? First of all, let's look at the puzzling hook. Where are we made to ask some questions? You may have got different ones from me, and that's absolutely fine. Just make sure that your theory, your thinking behind it, is the same as mine. So first of all, I thought, right, what did I want to ask a question about? First of all, I saw this bit, and it was a bit about being bitten by a scorpion or a rattlesnake. And I thought, first of all, why would you want to? But that answer was questioned, because you get to spend a day or 2 recovering in his tent instead of having to dig holes. But then my question was, why are they having to dig holes out on the lake? It's not about being bitten by a scorpion or a rattlesnake. The question I'm being made to ask was, why are they digging holes? Okay. And my other evidence for using the puzzling hook is here, where first of all my question is, why aren't they allowed to be in the shade? Why aren't the campers allowed to have some shade? Why does the warden own the shade? How can someone own shade? That's my other question. Okay, so I just had those 2. You may have had some other ones. That's absolutely fine. So where's some evidence for the visual hook then? Well, obviously we have this description of Camp Green Lake, and there's quite a few different ones. So it was just a dry, flat wasteland. The town was shriveled and dried up along with a lake. So therefore it's describing the lake as shriveled and dried up as well. It's about 95 degrees in the shade. That'll be Fahrenheit, not Celsius, I'm presuming. Maybe not, I'm not sure. There's not much shade in a big dry lake. And there are only 2 oak trees on the eastern edge. Okay, there are a few other ones maybe as well. Right, the direct address hook. Where is the writer speaking to us? Where does it feel like we're having a bit of a conversation with the writer? Here's a good rule to remember. They're telling us to remember something. Telling us to don't bother the rattlesnakes and they won't bother us. You won't die, using the word you, but you don't want to be bitten by a yellow spotted lizard. No, you're right, I don't. And there is nothing that anyone can do to you anymore. So using that word you, there's a few other examples as well, so you may have had some different ones. Okay, you don't need to get all those down. There is more than enough. You need to make sure that you've got at least one example for each of those puzzling hooks written down next to your hook. So if you need to pause the video to do that, make sure you've done that now. Okay? And finally, the last task of the lesson year 8 is to answer the question at the top of the screen. Which is the most effective narrative hook in chapter 1 of Holes? So I want you to pause the video and just write the question down in your exercise book or wherever it is that you are working. And I want you to remind yourselves of the 3 narrative hooks we have identified in chapter 1: puzzling, visual and direct. Now there is no right answer to this. This is your choice. You need to decide which one you think is the most effective narrative hook. Decide on how you've been engaged in that first chapter. And if you need to pause the video and go back and reread it, that is absolutely fine. It's entirely up to you. So you're going to write a short paragraph explaining which narrative hook you think is the most effective. But I'm going to bring up on the screen some sentence helps for you to use. So you can start your paragraph off with, I think the most effective hook is, and you will write the puzzling hook, the visual hook, or the direct address hook. And I want you to make sure you use a clear piece of evidence that you have identified from your paragraph that backs up which hook it is that you've used. Then I want you to explain why you have chosen that hook. Why has it engaged you as a reader? to challenge you to develop your paragraph, try and use some connectives. Try and make sure you give more than one explanation as to why that hook has engaged you. However, klaxon warning, I do not want you to use in your paragraph the phrase, it makes you want to read on, or it makes me want to read on, or any variations of that phrase. Okay, Aruba, Aruba, none of those phrases. So in the box next to it are your phrases you can use instead. Okay, so it encourages me to read on because. Why? What do you want to find out about? It interests me in the setting because. It makes me wonder whether. It causes me to question if. That is what you use instead of it makes you want to read on. No English teacher has ever at King James's School taught you to use a phrase, it makes you want to read on. We never want to see that in your English book. Okay? Aruba, Aruba. Caution. Okay? So we do not use this phrase. We use these to help us avoid it instead. Okay? So I want you to pause the video here at this point, and I want you to use these phrases here to help you write your paragraph. And on the next slide is my example of what I would write, so you can check yours against mine instead. Okay, you're right? So pause the video here and write your own paragraph. So what did I write then? So you can compare yours to mine. Don't worry if it's not the same. I'm not you. I don't write as if I'm in year 8. I've had a go. But don't worry if yours isn't exactly the same, and you can just see if you've used your sentence stems the same as mine. Okay, so I chose the puzzling hook. I quite liked that one. All right. I have written that I think the most effective hook is the puzzling hook. This hook is used where the writer states, the warden owns the shade. I liked that bit. This hook engages me as a reader because it makes me question how someone can own the shade. How can someone own shade? You can't buy shade. Also, so I've used my connective there, it makes me question whether or not the warden is a cruel character and what we might learn about them. It's quite difficult because I've read the book a number of times. In addition, I'm showing off now, I've got another connective. It makes me wonder whether the warden may be challenged about their ownership of the shade by those who also seek it on Camp Green Lake. I don't know about you, but if I was on Camp Green Lake and the warden owned the shade and I wanted some of the shade, I think I'd go and try and steal some of the shade off her or him, whatever gender they may be. I'm not going to give any spoilers away. Okay, so read your own paragraph, year 8, and see if you can compare it to mine. Okay? Okay, year 8, that's the end of today's lesson. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've worked hard. Your next lesson will be coming up on further chapters in wholes. Any problems, make sure you get in touch with your teacher. See whether or not you want the work uploading on Teams, however they want doing that at the end of the lesson or at the end of the week, because we'll want to see what you're doing and making sure that we can give you some feedback. All right. Well done for all your hard work, and we hope to see you soon. Bye.